بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب.
Can you move the mic away a little bit?
Yeah, I'm doing that. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay.
We can hear you, Ustad.
Okay. So today I want to talk about the crisis of Adab, respecting respect, and how that relates to the institution of marriage. Now, I'm going to say some things that will ruffle a lot of feathers today with the sisters. And I'm sorry, but I'm sorry about that in advance. But to understand any problem, we're not looking at a real situation. To understand any problem, you have to simplify the problem first. So I'm talking only from the perspective of its most simplistic perspective, so that we can get an idea and a grasp on the problem at hand. What is that problem? The problem is children no longer respect the adults, and it's a serious problem. And we have to ask ourselves, why has this, there's a 200-year history that has allowed this to develop, okay? A 200-year history that I'm going to describe to you. Why is it that the children no longer respect the adults? And so this is going to be a long journey that I have to do in the next half an hour. So therefore, there's going to be some gaps in my conversation, but I'm hoping that I can make my points. I have like 7 pages of notes here, which I'm supposed to do in half an hour. So let's get started. And I know you sisters are very, very tired. But if you give me 30 minutes, I think at least you will definitely benefit in the following days, if not after my speech, because sometimes sisters hear what I have to say and it ruffles their feathers, but then they come back after a few days and say, you know what, that did make sense from a historical perspective. Okay, so before we talk about adab in the family, let us visit the concept of individualism. So what is individualism? And when did individualisms take place? Individualism is different from individuality. Individuality is we're all individuals, but individualism, any ism like communism, is when you actually, that becomes part of your belief system. So what is individualism? Before I talk about what is individualism, let me go ahead and give you some manifestations of individualism in our society. So at the educational level, you'll notice that a teacher said, if it's a math teacher, the math teacher will say, I taught you math, but what I really want to teach you is critical thinking for your own self. Or I taught you history, but what I really want to teach you, it's not about history alone, it's about helping you critically think for yourself. At the political level, you have, for example, people vote. One man, one vote. At the economic level, it is we are rational beings. If we all feel cigarettes are good for us, we're going to buy and sell cigarettes. And we're all rational beings. If we feel Pepsi is good for us, we're going to buy and sell Pepsi. Now, how did individualism affect the concept of adab, particularly from a perspective of the family? So now let me just start by a few definitions. Individualism is the idea that freedom of thought and action for each person is the most important quality of a society, meaning the individual is more important than society. And what does individualism mean morally? It means you can do whatever you want. I'll read to you another definition, which I'll come back to it towards the end. It is a concept or idea or behavior that each person should think and act independently. Each person or oneself is more important than the group. Now, marriage is a group, right? So keep that in mind. Is more important than the group, and one should work for one's own advantage. And that also plays into marriage. And then that affects the whole process, as I will share with you in a little bit. It urges a person to strive for oneself, self-progress, personal achievements, and therefore the pursuit of competition to see who gets the most benefit. This is the idea of individualism in short. Okay, now I just want to look at this rationally. If you were to critique this idea from its own methodology, meaning from where this idea of individualism comes from, just as Muslims, if we were to critique this, what would be your best critique of this idea? Generally, I would ask the audience the question, but because I'm out of time, I'm just gonna try to go as fast as I can. One good critique is to say, okay, who are you, right? Are you your feelings? No, you're not your feelings. So where is this person? Where is this being that feels autonomous enough to make decisions for themselves? In other words, what I'm trying to say is that every part of you is an algorithm. Your cells are an algorithm. Your organs an algorithm. Your thought patterns are an algorithm. Your DNA is an algorithm. So where is this freedom that for the last 200 years people have been talking about we have? If you have no soul, then we are more in a state of determinism than we are in a state of actually having free will. And there's a lot of interesting studies on this, but I'm just sharing one aspect of that. Now, if we are in a state of individualism, how do we determine that? And how does marriage affect that? Well, as a family, we have to ask ourselves, do we do more activities as individuals, or do we do more activities as a collective body? Meaning, if the daughter is in her room and the son is in her room, they're together in the same space, but they are, as a we mode, they are not functional. They're not functioning in the we mode, right? Some families, for example, will not even eat together. Some families have at least one event where they all eat together. So that's a we mode event that creates some sense of collectivity, that you belong to some collective space. Okay, so now, but it goes much beyond that, because having a bunch of we activities is not enough, as I will share with you. Now, let me go straight to, so the first question I asked is, how many we events do we have in our family? The wife and the husband, and the wife, husband, and children versus individual events. In the past, for example, 200 years ago, there was always more we events than I events. You wake up in the morning together, you go to the field together, you deal with the crops together, you harvest together, you do everything from morning to evening together. There was a strong sense of a we mode. If your family doesn't have a strong sense of we mode, then everyone's in their own individual state and the bonding is not really that strong. You know, I usually say this also as an example. When we are praying in the masjid, even though we're praying Salatul Jama'ah, but if you don't know the person to your right and you don't know the person to your left and you don't even know the imam, well, that's still an individual event, even though they did it together, but it's not really a collective event in its true sense of the word. Okay. Okay, now, let me now talk about the part that I think will hurt some feelings. And please forgive me from beginning. So I'm going to reference one book. The book is called The Family, From Institution to Companionship. Now, please, sisters, listen to me, okay? What has happened in the last 200 years with family is that the family has moved from being an institution to becoming just friends. Everyone's just a hodgepodge of friends. The father's a friend with the child's a friend with the mother, everyone's a friend with one another. And this is what's happened in the last 200 years. The institutional aspect of marriage has been lost. What do I mean by institutional aspect of marriage? I'll come to that in a second. But what needs to be first understood is that marriage went from being an institution, meaning, okay, let me go ahead and define that a little bit. Institution is a place of where there is some hierarchy, where there is some authority, right? So there, like you go to your workplace, there's a hierarchy. every important place has a hierarchy, whether it's a country, whether it's an institution, could be educational, every company has friends. People are friends, they work together, but there is a hierarchy, right? And so there's norms and there's rules and there's enforcement of rules. That's a hierarchy. So what happened in the last 200 years? Family went from being a place of institution to companionship, meaning me and my wife, we're just friends, if that. And me and my kids are also what? Just friends. Where now when the wife, in the last 200 years, when she used to yell at her kids, even 50 years for that matter, but certainly 200 years ago, if a wife was yelling at her kids, the kids knew that behind her is the shadow of her, what? Husband. But now when a wife is yelling at the kids, it's just her and she's just another friend. Now, where does that leave us? Now, let me just share with you, I mean, I don't know how much time I have because I'm still in the first page of my notes. Okay. This textbook that talks about this sociological phenomenon, the family, from institution to companionship. In becoming companions, if you're companions at best, because most families tend to have some level of hate and love relationships also, and so on and so forth. The summary of this book is as follows. The thesis of this textbook is that the family is in transition from an institution to companionship. Individualism, and why is that? Because of the rise of individualism. So as individualism went up, what happened to the family structure? The family structure as an authority and as a hierarchy went down, and all that remained of the two aspects of a marriage, which is marriage as an institution and marriage as a place of companionship. The institutional aspect of marriage went down as individualism went up. And so the only relationship husbands and wives had was as what? As friends. And when your kids are friends and you're friends and everyone's friends, well, who's going to enforce hierarchy? Who's going to enforce Adaab? Who's going to enforce and teach Adaab? How are you going to enforce these rules? If you go to kindergarten, what's the first thing they teach you in kindergarten? Anybody remember? These are what? These are the rules. And because there's rules, it's an institution, they have to teach you rules. Families nowadays have no rules because everyone's doing everything on their what? On their own. Equality of the husband and wife promotes their empathy and friendship. Their friendship, isolation makes their communication and communicate. And so you get my point. I'm going to go on to read some more aspects that have to do with this, and then we'll see how much time is left. Thank you. For there to be Adaab, there has to be hierarchy. When you meet a sheikh that you respect, you accept the fact and you submit to the fact, this sheikh, not because of an intrinsic value he may have, but because of a place he holds, you accept the fact this person is in a higher position than me, right? There has to be a hierarchy. For there to be a hierarchy, there has to be an institution that respects the hierarchy. If the children see mom and dad always acting as friends, then the children will treat, because children mimic the parents. So the children will treat mom and dad just as what? Friends. There's no hierarchy. And then you're expecting the kids to learn Adaab. How are they going to learn Adaab? Even grandma is a friend. You know, this was never the case. I mean, ask the people around you that were older. This was like, I remember living in, when we were in Lahore, my family was in Lahore in Pakistan. My grandfather would come in, everyone would be like worried. Okay, grandpa's going to come in. He's going to want his food. He's going to want this. Everyone be quiet, so on and so forth. There was a hierarchy. The loss of hierarchy has resulted in the loss of adab in the Muslim community and in the world in general. You're Mr. Brown, you're my teacher, but we're just friends. Ultimately, it's a companionship. Every relationship has been reduced to, from a hierarchy, a teacher and a student was a hierarchy. Every hierarchical relationship has been equalized in the modern times. True or not? And does that have an impact on our kids? Yes. So now here's the part that I'm coming to that the sisters are not going to like. But how you navigate what I'm going to say is up to you. I'm not here to say you have to do this or you have to do that. I'm letting you know what the problem is and why this problem exists. And here are some possible aspects of that problem. Okay. If mom does not give extra respect to the dad in front of the kids will not give extra respect to mom. Now, of course, again, I have to emphasize this. Everyone's going to look at their home situation and say, well, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not trying to do that because I'm trying to simplify the matter to understand one problem without complicating it with other problems. And usually when it's a practical issue, there are multiple issues. Another sociologist, among others, argued that exposure to individualistic idea changes marital patterns. These ideas are so powerful that people who are exposed to them in education or travel incorporate them into family life even before they learn them in the marketplace. Edward Shorter writes, once the rules of marketplace individualism had been learned, the easily took control of the whole arena of conscious attitudes. I'm just going to skip some points here. Okay, so now, did the family of the Prophet ﷺ show respect to the Prophet? Meaning, did the wives of the Prophet show respect to the Prophet? How? I'll just give you one example because, again, I'm running out of time, so I'm short of several examples. But the most easy to understand example, I think, is what did the wives of the Prophet call the Prophet? Did they say Muhammad? What did they call him? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, the hierarchy was maintained. The hierarchy with the Prophet was maintained in his marriage. Now, imagine if we read a bunch of ahadiths and they're calling him Muhammad. How would we feel? We would not feel that level of reverence for the Prophet because even his wives are calling him Muhammad. The hierarchy was established in the Muslim community regarding the Prophet by our mothers, by the way that they communicated with him. They're saying, whenever they have a question, they're not saying, oh, my husband. They're saying, Ya Rasulullah, oh, Messenger of Allah. The whole hadith literature, all the books of hadith are very clear about this. Okay. Let me now move forward. You all know Barbara Walter. Some of you may have heard her and some of you may be too small. Documenting the American domestic history, she did a documentary called True Womanhood. She quotes a 19th century woman's magazine. The man bears rule over his wife's person and conduct. She bears rule over his inclinations, meaning she's describing how it was 200 years ago. The man, and I'm not saying the Western model in the past was the Islamic model. I'm not saying that. I'm only explaining how things went in history right now. The man bears rule over the wife's person and conduct, which is not Islamic, but she bears rule over his inclinations. He governs by law, and she governs by persuasion. So this is how it was. Okay. Now, what happened? What was I'm going to say was, because there's a new model now that is taking place as we speak. What was the model of individualism, the ultimate model of individualism, as the Industrial Revolution was coming into place? What was the ideal example of individualism and liberty? That was a single woman who was not married. Okay, especially after 1959, where the birth pill came into place, that really made things take off. Respect started to fade away because, well, you can't get me pregnant anymore because I got my pill, and that was the new default model of being free or being of individualism. Now, let me go back to what makes an institution. The formal and informal rules that organize, for example, what dad says goes, right? Dad takes shura. We work as an organization, not as friends. When at certain moments, it's clear we're working as an organization in the family structure. And at some cases, it's very clear we're working as friends also. So both are there within the Islamic paradigm. But what has happened, like I said, is the institutional aspect has faded away. And so therefore, kids have no reason to respect adults since everyone has become a friend. Okay. Okay, let me skip some things here. All right, 3 conversations every parent and family have to have. How do we increase our we mode as a family, where we're all acting in synchronity as we instead of I? Number 1, are we a group of friends or are we an institution? Every wife and husband have to have this discussion. Are we working as an institution or are we working just as friends? Now, if the wife allows the husband to work as an institution, that will give the children a chance to experience what Adaab really means. That's the harsh pill for the sisters. But that's a conversation each couple has to have. Is that does or how does a wife show respect to her husband? For example, I'll share with you one thing that's very, very common, is that a lot of times the sisters, they treat their children over their husband, or they choose their children over their husband. But it's important to show the children the husband comes first, to establish the hierarchy that today I'm going to give food to dad first. For example, I'm just giving it as an example, right? That institutional aspect of family is what has been completely demolished by the times that we live in. Okay. Are sisters willing to exchange cultural power for legal power? This would be the ultimate question. To create a hierarchy that will set new and better standards for Adaab for the coming generation. Now, let me also explain, as you know, the problem that most of the young sisters have is what? They're on edge. And what is the problem most of the boys have is they're unmotivated and don't really know what they're doing in life. One of the things that's missing from a man's life is that there is no sense of hierarchy, and hierarchy also means a sense of responsibility. Women are in a sense, they're in a state on the edge because they know they can't really rely on anyone. And the men, when they feel that when the men don't have someone to look up to in terms of hierarchy, And if they don't feel their hard work is going to pay off in a form of respect, then they don't have a need to go beyond the friend phase. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'll try to make sense of it shortly. I also want to make clear here so that it's not just one way. The husband is also, in an ideal situation, if there's a jama'ah with an amir, with a shura, the husband is also submitting himself to a hierarchy. A husband submits himself to his boss. A husband submits himself to his sheikh. So it's not, and the husband has to actually be that role model that the Prophet talked about. Kullukum mas'ulun wa kullukum ra'yun, kullukum mas'ul an ra'yatihi. That every one of you is questionable and every one of you is a shepherd and responsible. And the man is responsible to his, the Amir is responsible and questioned by the people that he leads amongst the men. And then it continues the hadith, you know that. So what I'm trying to say is that the man has to be the first example of showing that he also submits to something. And in fact, I will talk from a perspective of archetypes, if you don't mind. How much time do I have so that 10 minutes? Okay, let me see how many people. All right, we'll try to make the best of this. When a husband says to his wife, in the olden days, this is 200 years ago, when the whole society had a hierarchy. When the husband said to his wife, let me ask my elders, which car should I buy? Well, they didn't have cars, but okay. Which horse should we get, right? So 200 years ago, when the husband said, let me take shura from my dad, or when he said, let me take shura from the elder of our community, or from my sheikh, the wife had a sense of tranquility in her heart that my husband, what? He's also submitting to some authority. And if the wife had a problem, she knew she can go to this authority. The wife submits to the husband submits to those that are above him. Ultimately, the person on the very top is hopefully somebody who fears Allah, right? That's the ideal model that we have. Okay. So the husband also submits to his hierarchy at work, in the jama'ah, with the sheikh and his parents. And the children understand there is a sense of sami'na wa ata'na. We listen and we what? Obey. Without that, there is no adab. Without that, it's just acting. Without that, it's just a type of hypocrisy. Okay, so that was the first point I wanted to make. Now, as you know, in social science, there is an axiom in social science, which is, I'm sure many of you sisters have heard of this axiom, which is the most important axiom in all of social science studies, which is power tends to what? Corrupt. And absolute power will corrupt what? Absolutely. I, as a Muslim, would like to partially challenge this idea that it is not true that if a mother is all powerful over her kids, that she is going to corrupt her kids by her power, or that if a husband or a sheikh or a khalifa is necessarily going to abuse his power. The problem that we have, the second problem we have, for which there's no adab, why we have no adab, is we live in a situation and in the world today where we have been taught to always question the people in authority. There is no trust between the people and the people that rule them, the people and the cops, the people, the wife and the husband. Whoever is in authority is necessarily what? Bad. So the sheikh is bad, the cop is bad, the people in the government are bad, the doctor is also bad, and the husband's also bad, and the dad is also bad, because we don't trust anyone in what? We don't trust anyone in power authority. That is the overall cultural, that's what pop culture is. Pop culture is question authority. Pop culture is don't accept authority. Every single cartoon you'll find in Disney cartoons, every one of them has only one major theme, and that is to go against authority. It could be Pocahontas, could be Cinderella, could be Ariel, could be whatever other cartoons they were. Okay. And then every syndicated program shows a man as being stupid. So it could be I Love Raymond or Bill Cosby or any other show. There has been this, you can say, targeted, subconscious, subliminal message that the sisters have been getting for years and years, which is the men are stupid and they're clowns and don't trust them. Okay. Now, what is another? Now, again, for everyone, I'm not talking about any one specific situation because any specific situation has multiple layers. I'm only focusing on the history of why Adaab has been removed and why why the slave mother who slaves after her kids, her children treat her like she's a slave. Why children talk back. What's the historical phenomenon that is taking place, has taken place, that has allowed this to happen? You talk back to friends. You don't talk back to higher authority. And the sisters, the mothers, the wives have to think, okay, am I willing to compromise some level of authority to show my kids there is a hierarchy in our family, that dad comes first? And you have to sit down with your husbands and talk about, okay, we're friends, but are we also an institution where there's a hierarchy? And how do we demonstrate that to our society, to our kids? Until you don't do that, you're going to keep losing your kids. How much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So now in the 5 minutes that I have, let me see. I will say one important thing and I'll end, and then I'll let anybody ask any questions, not online questions, just in-person questions here. Is that, what is man's greatest need? We talked about this, right? What is man's greatest need more than love? Respect. And a wife may think, well, if I respect my husband, then I'm giving up something. But the reality is respect gives birth to respectability. Meaning, in other words, when you respect him, and what does it mean to respect the husband? What studies show, husband, like if you think of 10 things he's really good at, or 5 things he's really good at, but you may have never really said you're really good at fixing a car, or you're really good at writing a book, or you're really good at doing something. You're really good at doing YouTube videos. So if you may have never said that to your husband, but it's like that's his nutrients, that's his nutrition. To respect him in front of the kids, to respect him and to show respect will give back in respectability. That's why it's not a 50-50 sum. It's not a zero-sum game of you get back too. And if the wife feels loved, it's going to create lovability. She's going to give back, right? So the same way, if the husband feels respected, he's going to give back in respect. Another thing that has to be done, and I'll say this before I end, is that fathers and mothers need to teach their children about how to respect the mother and father using the hierarchy. I'll give you an example about husband-wife relationship. I'll say one thing. Look, guys are never going to say, why do you want flowers? Right? You just want them. In the same way, don't ask, why does the husband need respect? He just needs it. He needs to feel respected. His ego is just fragile. Okay? And he needs it just like the girls, they want flowers. So the father teaches the son, give your mother flowers. The daughter teaches the father, the mother teaches the daughter, your father is leaving, write a note of how much you appreciate how hard he works for the family. In other words, don't think only in terms of companionship, but also think in terms of what? The hierarchy and how to establish that hierarchy. Because if you don't establish that hierarchy, you're going to end up not teaching your kids the lessons that you really want them to learn via the marriage. Okay, so I think I said about 20% of what I wanted to say. But I think that's good, inshallah. This is what Allah will. Okay. So I will tell you one last thing. Sorry. So there was a lady during Christmas time. Now, you know, for Americans, Christmas time is really a big, difficult time where a lot of decisions have to be made. And so she said, for 30 days, I'm not going to criticize my husband at all. This is an American lady, okay? And so it was Christmas time where a lot of things happen. People are meeting. She has 1,000 things to say. She kept herself from criticizing or giving suggestions over her husband's suggestions for 30 days. I want you to think about what happened to that marriage. Now, I want to challenge you with, since we're taking baby steps here, try for one day not to criticize your husband and to show him respect. For one day. Do you think you can do that? So that's your homework. One day of respectability, and to see if that seeds of respectability give back to you in any shape or form. All right, is there any questions? And I'm sorry if I offended someone. Yes.
So I've explained it to my kids before, and after that, it's gone well. But they asked my 6-year-old. She asked me a question, and I really wasn't sure how to explain it. And she asked me, "Well, if Allah comes first, then it's me. So how do you explain that?"
After the prophet who comes?
The mom.
Okay.
I don't know when you're trying to explain.
Oh, okay. That hadith.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very simple. As far as law is concerned, the husband's first. As far as who you owe more debt to, like culturally, in a sentimental way, morally, you owe more to your mother than your father. But the father is the Amir of the house. So if you have $10 and you want to give it to your mother or father, you're going to give it to your mother. But if your dad says, do A, then you're going to do A. It's the hierarchy where he comes in. But in terms of moral respect, the mother comes first. So Islam balances it by hierarchy versus moral authority versus hierarchy. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think I have a question.
Yes.
So I have engaged right now. She's getting married, and her fiance is so and being like he doesn't know better, and she's trying to teach him, and she's struggling to say. She feels like he feels offended every time she tells him something, but he couldn't lead her in the Shema. He couldn't read a small Quran, but she respects him. She does respect him, but the problem is she doesn't know how to understand the idea that he is not religiously higher than her. So what should she do? She doesn't want to break though. She's elder, not very elder, like she's in her 40s, and she want to get married, but she doesn't want to settle.
Well, don't expect a person to change. If she marries him, she should marry him as he is, not expecting change. Now, if he changes, that's good. So they should have a conversation about their religious knowledge before they get married. Because if that's her expectation, she should make it clear. And if he can't handle her criticism now, then don't think he will handle her criticism after they're married. Yes, it could help a little bit if the husband is willing to, or if the fiance is willing to, yes. Yes.
Just a question. I don't know if that thing is. We allow Saddam to come in and speak. I don't know if it's a weak or strong hadith, but there's a hadith about when Allah was to give such we only give such to Allah. But if he would have willed it, it would have been the husband.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Allah would have, would have wanted to give to our husband. What's your thoughts on that?
If the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So let me explain to you how you should look at anything in hadith literature. You don't look at one hadith, you bring all the ahadith together on a certain subject. Okay. Number two, if you have an eye doctor, this will solve a lot of problems in terms of hadith literature. If you have an eye doctor, he's only going to look at what? The eye. When the Prophet's talking about a certain subject, he's only talking about that subject, irrespective of any other aspect, right? So in terms of respect for the husband, this is what he said. Now, if you want to get the bigger picture, you have to connect this hadith with all the related ahadiths. For example, I'll give you an example. The Prophet said, none of you is a believer until he wills for his brother what he lives for himself, he wants for himself, correct? Does it really mean that no one's a believer until you want everything? No. It means that in its perfect sense. But the Prophet's not looking at like mistakes they've made. Like it's just like a doctor is looking at only one part of the body. I hope that helps. Yes, but what that hadith does establish is how important hierarchy in the family is, which has been lost and needs to be reestablished. And so husbands and wives need to talk about, okay, the wife says to the husband, how can we reestablish this hierarchy, which I can show the kids you are the boss of the house. Now they can pretend in front of the kids and not really do it, just to teach them adab, but however you want to do it.
Sister here is asking how, when we're talking about the hierarchy in a house, how does step parents play in or stepchildren? Does it change anything, or is it the same thing? Or
it's similar, but it's different. Look, in principle, the stepfather is representative of the mother. He's not a father. Okay. So I represent as an adult the wishes of my wife with my stepchildren. Now, once my relationship develops deeper, now I can assert myself also. But you cannot start a marriage thinking you're going to come in and be their dad. It doesn't work like that. You come in as I'm an adult who represents your mom. So your mom wants you to clean up. You don't say, I want you to clean up. You say your mom wants you to clean up. You get it? So that's how a stepdad works. Yes. So like I said, I was talking about the big picture, not a specific picture. But of course, if the husband is disrespecting his wife, that's going to affect the kids too. Yes. And they're going to mimic that too.
Sisters, I'm gonna have to have a big question just so Omar can catch him up for prayer. If that's okay.
Yeah.
We can allow him to lead first. So sisters in that corner, you can pull up, just move this way so he can step out. And then the sister can leave. You can leave in just a second. Thank you very much, Sheikh Omar. We appreciate your time. Plug for Sheikh Omar. He is doing lectures. If you have more questions,